Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear okay? Okay. Welcome to the Jewish Museum. I'm Nellie Szilagyi-Benedek, Director of Education. I'm so pleased that our museum is the venue for this evening's Moment Magazine Karma Foundation Short Fiction Contest event. I know that formal introductions will follow, but I wanted to add a few personal words about Alan Schuss and Joyce Carol Oates, who will be in conversation later in the program. I just finished reading Alan Schuss's Songs of Slaves in the Desert and wanted to share how much I enjoyed this beautifully written, elegant novel, a story that grapples with complex and troubling issues about race and prejudice in a completely immersive way. I also feel the need to mention, in the interests of full disclosure, that I've been an ardent Joyce Carol Oates fan for decades, and that one of my greatest pleasures in life has been trying to read everything she's published. Because just when you think you've read everything, there's a new collection of essays in print, or a piece that surfaces in the New Yorker, or suddenly a tome of historical fiction and a volume of short stories that are published back to back. I hope that many of you have seen our current Chagall exhibition. When some critics dismissed Chagall as a fantasist, the artist said, quote, "I am against the terms fantasy and symbolism. Our whole inner world is reality, perhaps even more real than the apparent world. To call everything that is illogical fantasy or fairy tales is really to admit that one does not understand nature." Joyce Carol Oates constructs that inner world that Chagall is referring to, and it becomes so palpable that you start to question what is real and what is imagined. And when the story ends and you rejoin the outside world, you realize that you've been profoundly affected and that you understand loss, vulnerability, terror, and madness in ways you hadn't before. Writers have the power to impact their readers in ways they probably can't even fathom. Their words become part of the fabric of our lives, which is why readers feel as if they know their favorite authors intimately. All that is to say that I would like to thank the writers in the room for sharing their stories and their thoughts about writing with us tonight, because I know it will enrich us. And now I'm pleased to introduce Nadine Epstein. Nadine has been editor and publisher of Moment Magazine since 2004, when she relaunched the magazine. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage, and I also ask you to please silence your cell phones. Thank you.
Welcome to this wonderful evening celebrating the Moment Magazine Karma Foundation Short Fiction Contest. And thank you, all of you, for joining us. And thank you to the Jewish Museum for partnering with us. So Moment, and there's a copy for all of you there, was co-founded in 1975 by Elie Wiesel and Leonard Fine. It's the premier independent Jewish magazine in the country. Please read it and take your copy home. And in this one, you'll find one of our winners' stories. And I want to introduce you now for a moment to Sal Levin, who runs the contest for us.
The Moment Karma Foundation Fiction Contest has been honoring Jewish-themed fiction since 2000 with the generous support of Sharon Karmazin and Dina Elkins at the Karma Foundation. Sharon is a tremendous creative force, a Broadway producer with major productions under her belt, and is deeply committed to supporting the Jewish community and the arts. Her daughter, Dina, runs the Karma Foundation and provides us with sage advice, and we are indebted to both of them. The Moment Karma Foundation Fiction Contest has quite the pedigree. Judges have included Geraldine Brooks, Dara Horn, Jonathan Safran Foer, Erica Jong, Nicole Krauss, and Walter Mosley. And the winners of the contest, including Rosselle Rosette, Sherry Mandel, and Joan Legant, have gone on to great success in publishing. Tonight, we're very excited to present the winners of this year's contest, who will read from their work. First, we will hear from Roberta Newman, whose story, The Girl of the Comet, is our third place winner. She is the author of a forthcoming book on Yiddish letter manuals and is the director of digital initiatives at the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thanks so much to Moment Magazine, the Karma Foundation, and Alan Schuss for granting me this honor. And I'd also like to thank my writers group, Paratactic, for workshopping this story with me so many times. I'm glad that some of you could make it tonight. I'm going to read a few paragraphs from the beginning of my story. It's 1910, the time of Halley's Comet, in a small town in Lithuania. A son has come home from America to visit. My mother's hands are red and chapped, crooked from rheumatism. She's been to the baths in Birstenis once or twice, and the doctor has advised her that if she can't go to a spa, she should at least soak once or twice a week at home in salted water, especially in winter. But she hasn't been doing this since I've been home on my visit, complaining that it's too cold and drafty, besides being too much work for my sister, Mara, to have to haul the zinc tub into the kitchen and then lug and heat enough water to fill it. All of them go to the steam bath instead, as I've been doing, but they go only once a week, and I go every other day. They laugh at me for being so fastidious for a man, but the truth is, I've gotten used to being clean, and I'm no longer used to small-town living in Lithuania with its lack of indoor plumbing. When I lived here, I never noticed how the outhouse smelled, but now I do, and the odor from the chamber pots under our beds at night is also noticeable to me. I miss my landlady's porcelain bathtub, tiled bathroom, and even the gas lamps. Mrs. Horowitz's hands are smooth and plump, even though she's 51, my mother's age exactly. In America, women don't have hands like my mother's, at least not that I can remember seeing. I look at Mara's hands as she tears bits off her pieces of challah and sops them in the cholent, the Sabbath stew. She's sitting on the end of the bench next to our father, her body twisted a little sideways so that she's almost facing away from us. She's slumping with her chin resting on her hand. The look on her face is irritable. Her hands still look all right, though her nails are broken and a little dirty. It's up to me what her hands will look like when she's 40, whether they'll be twisted and spotted like our mother's, or doughy and soft like Mrs. Horowitz's. Mira doesn't know about this. At least I don't think she knows. The future of her hands is not on her list of all the things she's been deprived of because her little brother has escaped to America. According to her way of thinking, I've gotten everything and she's been left with the dregs of life. You don't want more? Mother pushes the bowl at me. Eat, eat, my father urges, gesturing with his hand at the bowl. Only one more week for you and then you won't have Mama's dumplings anymore. No, no, thank you, I say, and push my plate away a little. I'm full. I won't even be able to eat supper later, I don't think. I offer my father a cigarette, but he declines. He really doesn't enjoy anything but his snuff, and even that he hardly takes. It's schnapps he prefers, and he reaches eagerly for the bottle of scotch I brought for him as a gift from Massachusetts. He pours shots for me and for himself. You can't put off your return a few more weeks, my mother frets, frowning at the sight of me smoking on the Sabbath. Maybe it's not a good idea to be on the sea during the time of the star. Who knows what could happen? I see the shadow of a smirk on Mara's face. Mother can't remember the word comet. Nothing will happen, nothing will happen. My father waves his hands at Mother as if shooing a chicken. Foolish wives' tales, everything will be fine. Don't get yourself worked up. He looks apprehensively at her, warning her with his eyes not to fall apart, not to burst into tears. Then he turns to me. In America, they don't believe in such nonsense, do they? Their women aren't running to the graveyard at midnight to marry blind widows to retarded orphans, are they? He cackles. Some of the more superstitious and older Jews have been going around in a frenzy for months, ever since January, when the first comet had lit up the evening sky for several nights in a row with its glowing tail. And now there is the second one, which has been visible in the sky over Lithuania for several days now. My father has been making fun of his old friend Pinchas for fasting, and pooh-poohs those who quote the passage from the Talmud about the star that comes only once every 70 years and makes ships go off course.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Don't sit down. You're not allowed to sit down yet.
Okay.
Hold on. This is for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Now, Lauren Watel, our second place winner, will read from her story, The Nothing of History. Lauren's work has won the 2012 Mississippi Review Prize in Fiction and has appeared in journals such as Plowshares and 5 Points. Please join me in welcoming her.
I'd like to thank Moment Magazine, the Karma Foundation, Alan Schuss, and Sal 11. I'm honored to be here, and I'm thrilled to be reading with Becky and Roberta. And I will just set up this small section from my story by telling you that it's about a couple, Reva and Miles, who has experienced a personal tragedy, and they're touring a Holocaust site in Lithuania with a group of poets. The road leading into the Panerai forest cut through thickets of evergreens like a thin scar. As the bus pulled into an empty parking lot, the chatter of the poets died away, and Regina tucked her red binder under one arm. Once disgorged from the bus, the group walked along a paved pathway, trees stretching on either side out of the lush summer grass. They paused at a memorial honoring the 70,000 Jews who had died in the forest, their bodies heaped into pits originally dug by Red Army soldiers for fuel storage. Regina picked up a pine cone and recited a prayer in Hebrew. Many of the poets placed stones at the foot of the memorial. Reva snapped pictures, the faded outer rim of a lone puddle, her husband's shadow spilling like ink over the bricks. The group followed a pathway further into the forest. After several sharp bends, they reached the first pit, an enormous grassy crater bordered by brick and encircled by forest, tranquil, bucolic, ethereal, like an abandoned landing site on a distant verdant planet. As the poets lined up along the tree line, Reva photographed their feet, Miles's imported loafers darkly lustrous among the sneakers and sensible walking shoes. Reading from her binder in a hushed voice, Regina described the Nazis' method of mass extermination. Jews were transported to the forest by train or in trucks or on foot, told to undress, herded to the edge of a pit in small groups, shot and covered with sand. The poets cried and embraced, Miles in their midst gazing into the treetops. The second pit was deeper than the first, a stone retaining wall crumbling around its periphery. At the bottom, a wheeled contraption made of wooden planks and metal scaffolding, hinged in the center and propped on 3 concrete blocks. Ladders like this were used to make huge piles of the bodies of the killed people which were to be burned. A 2004 replica, read a bilingual plaque. In anticipation of the advancing Red Army, Regina recounted, the Nazis commandeered 70 Jews and 10 Soviet POWs to exhume, burn, and pulverize thousands of bodies buried in the pits of Panerai in order to destroy evidence of the Germans' mass murders. These 80 men lived in the bottom of one of the pits, chained at the waist and ankles. Miles leaned against a tree, his forehead pressed to the bark, eyes closed, as if he were trying to regain his balance. While the poets took shots of the plaque, the ladder, the crumbling stone wall, Reva photographed the weeds and wildflowers rooted between stones. At the third pit, 3 sets of stairs descended into a wide grass-sloped basin surrounded by a coronet of dense foliage. The landscape glowed a bottomless green, as if imbued with a supernatural phosphorescence. According to eyewitness accounts, Regina murmured to the poets gathered at the foot of the stairs, children from orphanages were shot on the edge of this pit. Silence moved over them like an incoming weather front. Reva focused her camera on the pine cone, which resembled a sleeping baby animal nestled inside Regina's fist. As she pressed the shutter button, she tried to recall if they had passed a bathroom along the way. From the edge of the pit arose a muffled, bitter choking, a rasping, like ripping fabric, with a jagged pulse, as if the forest were struggling to breathe. But it was Miles struggling to breathe, lips clamped shut, Miles staggering backward away from the pit, hands over his mouth. Miles making the thick animal wails that seeped through his fingers. Regina reached him first, pressed a tissue into his hand, twined an arm around his shoulder. As she spoke to him in low, soothing tones, Miles gazed at her with gratitude and relief. Reva envied her husband, wished she too could cry now. How could she fail to be moved by such a vast collective suffering? She was Jewish, after all, according to Jewish law, and her history was waiting for her, and those were her people, and they had died terrible deaths here, thousands of them. Something inside her, that burgeoning seed, must have been missing, because their pain barely penetrated her, as if she were crossing a meadow of glass in thick-soled shoes. Yes, she could summon a remote sympathy, the same sympathy she felt toward Armenians and Rwandans and Native Americans and Cambodians. If only she, like Miles, could connect to that other pain, that larger, grander, historical pain, perhaps it would dwarf her small, private pain. But history was nothing compared to this pain, which was merely personal and yet dwarfed everything. Come, they have kept the Panerai Memorial Museum open, especially for our group, Regina announced, shepherding Miles back up the stairs, the pine cone still resting inside her hand.
It's such a beautiful story, such a moving story. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
And now Becky Tuch, our first place winner, will read from her story, The Inker. Becky is the founding editor of The Review. Her fiction has received literature fellowships from the MacDowell Colony and the Somerville Arts Council. Please join me in welcoming Becky.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Jewish Museum for hosting this event, and also for thank you to Moment Magazine and the Karma Foundation for putting this event together. I would also like to thank Joyce Carol Oates. I think if I hadn't stolen my mother's copy of Foxfire when I was 15 years old, I probably would not be standing here today. So she's been a tremendous inspiration to me, so thank you. So the story I'm going to read, I'm just going to read the opening. It's called The Inker. The Inker. Avi knew his sister would take the news badly. 7 years his junior, Avi's sister was given to fits of feeling, storms of wild emotion. This evening, as Avi awaited his sister in his home, he adjusted the plates at the dining room table, wiped the insides of wine glasses with the bottom of his shirt, and folded and refolded the 3 maps he'd purchased that day, topographic, political, historical, and had fanned on the table's end. Another man might have been able to relax on the couch with a glass of wine and a magazine, or take solace in the warmth of his apartment, the savory sense of dinner drifting from the kitchen. But Avi Lieberman was not such a man. His blood was lava, his fingers unable to rest in one place. He fidgeted with the stems of his eyeglasses, then with the buttons of his shirt. In the kitchen, he opened a bottle of beer, forgetting that he'd already opened one moments before. He took a sip, then set the bottle down. "She's late," he told his wife. Gerda stood at the kitchen counter, rolling leaves of cabbage around some shredded vegetables. A pot of sauce simmered on the stove. "Your sister's always late," she said, setting the last of the cabbage rolls in a row and then placing the pan in the oven. In her final month of pregnancy, Gerda's belly protruded full and round. With her light hair and pale skin, she looked to Avi like a swan dipping in and out of a vaporous pond as she leaned forward to smell the sauce on the stove. The steam rose up in curled waves, then vanished around her face. "Did you set the table?" "Yes," Avi said. "Napkins too?" "Yes, of course napkins." "Then there's nothing to do but wait." "I'm waiting." "Well," Gerda said, "go wait in the living room." Avi lifted his wife's hair, kissed her neck, then left the room. The job offer had come 1 month ago. However, it wasn't until a week ago, after discussions with his wife, salary negotiations, teleconferences with colleagues, and Skype negotiations with the director of evolution research at the Berlin Academy, that Avi had at last accepted the offer. A historian of science with a special interest in evolution theories, he told people that he studied the evolution of evolution. Avi could not have dreamed of a better opportunity. Moving to Berlin was what Goethe wanted. The job was what Avi wanted. Still, the moment he'd accepted the offer, Avi had gone directly to the liquor store, bought a bottle of whiskey, and drank half of it alone in his office. Because Avi rarely consumed hard alcohol, he'd spent the rest of the night curled up next to the toilet, muttering slurred declarations of love to his wife and apologies to his sister, who would be left behind. When at last the doorbell rang, Avi righted his posture, checked the tuck of his shirt, then hurried through the hallway to the door. What he planned to say was, "Pesty, hi, you look great, come in. We have some news, some big and exciting news, come." Instead, what he said was nothing. His sister teetered above him on 2-inch heels, a black leather jacket zipped to her neck, her hair in a high ponytail at the top of her head. The tips of her brown hair were bleached white. She stood with a man who was taller than Avi, hairier too, with thick dark hair hanging over his ears and a grizzly dark beard across his chin, a bristly dark mustache above his lip. The man wore a red flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing black serpentine tattoos along his forearm. "You must be Avi." The man lifted his arm from Avi's sister's shoulder, extending his hand for a shake. Avi hesitated. "Sorry," Pesty said, vibrating with laughter. "Avi, this is Ted." She bumped her hip against the man beside her. "Teddy, this is my brother, Avi." Avi shook the man's hand. His grip was intensely strong, as if he spent his days wrangling cattle, strangling live animals. "I know I should have asked if Teddy could come over. It's just we totally ran into each other on the way here. Isn't that wild? He was just getting off work, and I was on the bus, and hey, there was my baby." Her baby? Avi blinked as if caught in a windstorm. "Anyway, he's not hungry, so if there's not enough food, it's cool. He can just drink, right, baby?" "Always," Ted said with a wry half-smile. Avi said nothing. "Pesty?" he wanted to cry out. "Is that you?" Never in all his life had he seen his sister this way. Hair bleached white, black leather jacket, black mascara, eyeliner, red lipstick. Never had he seen her so sexual, which was not the same as sexy, he knew, for she was not sexy. She was the refracted image of sexy, what you got when you put sexy into a glass of water and looked at it through the translucent liquid. It was distorted and bent and had nothing to do with confidence and poise and everything to do with perception and tricks of light. "Well," his sister said, "are you going to invite us in? You know we're vampires, Avi, and we need to be invited in." "Heh," Avi said, not quite laughing. "Vampires, yes, right, please come in." In a daze, Avi spun and watched his sister enter his apartment, the man named Ted entering after her. His sister's new boyfriend walked slowly, playing with the rolled sleeves of his flannel shirt, revealing more of the black designs running up his arms. The guy couldn't look more sketchy, and Avi thought less Jewish, if he tried. "Ted's an inker," his sister explained, clacking her way into the living room. She spun and placed her hand on Ted's arm, as if to protect it from her brother's critical gaze. "An inker," Avi said. "You know, a tattoo artist. He works right in the neighborhood, right next to that diner you love so much." "No kidding," Avi said. "That diner I love so much." He turned toward the thermostat, as if to understand why the room suddenly felt so hot. "Anyway," his sister went on, "Teddy knew right away that my tattoo animal would be a cat. I'm thinking of having that inked onto my arm. Wouldn't that be something? A giant black cat right here." She traced her fingernail along the sleeve of her leather jacket. Then she leaned toward Ted and nuzzled his neck. "Meow," she whispered. And at once, Avi knew it all. His sister was head over heels in love with him, the inker, just as she had been head over heels in love with the recovering junkie stand-up comedian in the East Village, a guy whose entire routine centered around his days trading oral sex for heroin. Or the peach farmer named Karma, a man boy who had wanted to marry her in spite of the fact that he was, well, already married. If it wasn't her tattoo animal, it was some new diet. If it wasn't some new diet, it was some new project, some activism work, or some outreach program, or some new way of making art, full of boundless energy that lifted like balloons out of her pores and into the sky. There were so many things that his sister did and wanted to do, and to each new thing, she gave herself fully until she was utterly transformed by it. Then, when the man she was dating went back to his wife, or the activist group turned out to be corrupt, or the diet shriveled all the flesh shriveled all her flesh until she was nothing but knobby wrists and protruding chin, then would all come crashing down around her, and the tear-racked phone calls to Avi would begin. I should have listened to you. I should have known. I'm so stupid. Why do I do these things? Avi, you have to help me. Please, big brother. Only this time, Avi wouldn't be there when she fell. Thank you.